Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Battlefields and Bourbon podcast, the podcast where we talk Civil War history and bourbon whiskey. My name's Elijah, and I'm joined by my co-host Jack, and we've got another special episode for you tonight. I'll let Jack get a little more into that.
Yeah, thank you, Elijah. We are coming to you from the historic Bell House in beautiful downtown Winchester, which is preserved by the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation, official sponsor of the Battlefields and Bourbon podcast. We do have a special episode today, and we are joined to tell us more about this topic. Our most reoccurring guest, Mr. Aaron Seaver of Aaron's Civil War Travels, to talk about the Battle of Pickett's Mill, the May 27th, 1864 battle. And we're kind of getting Western theater here. So this is an exciting episode, we think, broadening our horizons. And I'm excited to learn more about the Battle of Pickett's Mill and what happens in this area of the country. But before we do that, the most important thing, let's get our glasses full. So I'll hand it back over to Elijah to talk about this episode's bourbon.
Yeah, so this evening's pour is going to be Clyde May's Bourbon. This comes from Conica Ridge Distillery down in Troy, Alabama. This one's a 92 proof bourbon, aged about 4 to 5 years. Mash bill on this one, 78% corn, 12% rye, and 10% malted barley. So pretty high corn content. Should be a sweet one, but we'll see how that goes. Won a few gold awards at a few different spirits competitions. So I've got high hopes for this one. But the man himself, Clyde May, you are probably wondering who he is, what he's got in terms of ties to bourbon. So Mr. May was a World War II infantryman, earned a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart, and began moonshining when he came back home from overseas. And that's kind of where the whole Clyde May's distillery got started. Now, that's not to say that he didn't get into a little bit of trouble with the law in his moonshining days, because as you'll see on the bottle, it says legal since 2001. So in his days of shining, he did some time in federal prison, actually, for moonshining when they caught him. I mean, it wasn't for a very long time, but the fact that he did some time is enough to earn him that reputation. But without further ado, we can pop this one open and see what we think. But hopefully we got a good pop here.
Great pop.
Good one.
Yeah.
Good one. Off to a good start.
Very nice.
Yeah, right off the bat, I love the bottle on this. And you guys will see it in the pour profile picture we'll post on our respective social medias. Ooh. There is there's like a film reel. It's before my time. What would you call that, Aaron, at the top there, you old man? The reel type. Yeah. On top looks like it's film. And then that beast of Clyde May posted on the front with some old-timey pictures on the side. Bottle alone, ranks pretty high in my eyes. Yeah, cool. Definitely a neat one to have on the shelf just to look at.
This one's got a very interesting nose. I know you're still pouring, but this one is just when I pop the cork, you could smell it. Like, I mean, the nose just hits you right in the face. But this is like an orange vanilla almost.
It's a lighter. It's not as pungent. Yeah. I was gonna say too. I don't know if it's because of the label. Looking at the bottle, it's almost like apple cidery in color in the bottle. But
it's a very golden. This one's a very golden color, but it's
light gold, like really light amber.
Off the bat, the nose is really impressive for me.
All right, bottoms up, boys.
Yeah, I like that. That's unique.
Aaron, thoughts after you just pounded it?
I pounded that one.
He did.
You're not the first one. Mike Robinson did that. So. Yeah.
I normally sip, but I was like, you know what? Let's just dive right in. It smelled so good.
That palate is just the finish in general is like very long.
Yeah,
it just keeps.
It's not super sweet in taste, in my thoughts, and
it's not really.
I don't know. I almost get like a citrusy.
Yeah.
Type
that's where I'm getting that.
Not
that
sweet, but like I don't know. Like if you've ever bitten to a
orange dark chocolate.
Yeah, like the tartness of an orange peel. If you've ever accidentally just bit straight into an orange, that's almost the citrusy flavor I get from there.
Yeah, it's not overpowering, but it's like enough to let you know that it's there.
Even after gulping it down, the burn's really not that bad either. So that's.
Was there an age statement on it?
Online it says 4 to 5 years on their website.
This is a good
coming
sip.
from them, yeah.
No,
I like that for 92 proof. That's very mellow and very just well-rounded, full-bodied. I mean, it's got a lot of different notes to pick apart. Probably one of the most in terms of what we've had on the show so far. In terms of different flavors that I'm picking out of this, like orange, vanilla, honey, a little bit of baking spice. I mean, it's just
sour apple keeps coming to mind.
That's fair,
not like, but like
very
just
subtle.
kind of that tart.
Yeah, it's in
tart
there.
apple.
It's in there.
Yeah.
It's very, very subtle. But
No, I get that too. Yeah, the tartness, the tart fruit, whatever.
Yeah.
That's a category you can have on the palate, which I'm sure it is. If it's something, I think this is for folks that haven't broadened their horizons when it comes to they're just strictly Kentucky bourbon people. Mm-hmm. This is distilled in Alabama, correct?
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, like, there's no reason you can't be dipping your toes south of some state lines there.
Yeah, there are some purists out there that'll say that bourbon is only made in Kentucky, but that's not the case. Legally speaking, it's anywhere in the continental U.S. But there are some fantastic distilleries outside of Kentucky, and these folks are one of them.
Yeah, that's a nice change of pace. Honestly, It's not. I wasn't sure what to expect with it. So
yeah, it's an outlier for sure.
Pleasantly surprised.
And it doesn't sit on your palate too long. Mm-mm. It's not lingering, The
burn goes away, but the flavor notes keep popping up here and there, which is interesting because usually they kind of correlate with each other. They're kind of, as the burn goes away, the flavor starts to go away, but the flavor just keeps peeking through there. But I will say, in terms of this is their straight bourbon expression. They also do an Alabama-style whiskey. It's a little lower proof. I think it's like 85 proof. Don't quote me on that. And then they've got some like aged stuff, some single barrels, and some other things like that. But this one, if you are just looking for the bourbon, this is it right here. But yeah, I mean, that's Clyde Mays in a nutshell, and I think that's a good one to have on the show, especially with getting into Pickett's Mill, battle down in Georgia, next door neighbor to Alabama, and I think some Alabama regiments even served in the Confederate Army during this battle. So a good little connection there, and a little segue into this May 27th, 1864 battle. So, Aaron, what do you got for us tonight?
The Battle of Pickett's Mill, Georgia's part of the Atlanta campaign, 1864, with Sherman versus Johnston. So it's kind of early still in the campaign. Sherman is trying to move toward Atlanta to capture Atlanta. It's a big supply hub. Capturing Atlanta in 1864, along with the fall of the Shenandoah Valley, is what's going to actually propel Lincoln to the election, to the win of the election. And then, of course, once Sherman captures Atlanta, after the election results, he'll decide to march to the sea, to Savannah, and then up through the Carolinas. And, of course, by that time, the war's over. But Sherman is now in command of the military division of the Mississippi. Grant was his overall commander, is still his overall commander, but he's now in the east with the Army of the Potomac, still overseeing everything. And this is part of the grand strategy that Grant had for all Union armies to move south. So you have stuff going on in the valley, you have stuff going on in the overland campaign, and then you've got this happening in Georgia. And Sherman, there's going to be several battles fought, and unfortunately, Joe Johnston looks like he's doing the same thing he did on the peninsula earlier in the war, where he's retreating, and he retreats a lot. They start at Ringgold Gap, which is right at the top of Georgia, right there on the border with Tennessee, just over the border. I have been there. It's a really neat little place. There's a little railroad there, and you can see the hill. That Claiborne, who we're going to talk about, was actually involved in that battle and defend it. But they're going to continue moving south toward Atlanta. Sherman's going to keep trying to stretch Johnston's lines, going to keep trying to go around him. And Johnston is going to have some good counters to what Sherman is doing. Now, one reason Sherman does what he does is because he had spent a lot of time in that area before the war, so he knows the terrain of that area.
This is Sherman?
This is Sherman.
Why is that?
Just because he was there, he had taught a school in Louisiana, so he's through Georgia a lot. So he knows of that area. Specifically, there's going to be a spot called Allatoona Pass, and that's where he is going to push Johnston to. Now, there's not really a battle there. Sherman declines battle, actually. Johnston, when he pushes Johnston back, Johnston gets his troops in Allatoona Pass, and he's got this great ambush set up. It's one of the times where Johnston's like, I'm gonna fight here, and I've been to Allatoona Pass in the pouring rain, but when you're in Georgia and you're from Virginia, that's the first time I've been to a battlefield. You hike it in the rain. So I actually hiked Resaca and Allatoona Pass that day in the rain, and was happy to get to the hotel and dry off. But it was cool still. And I was by myself, so I was the only one on the battlefield. But hiking around Allatoona Pass, you can really see how there's a railroad that runs between it. The railroad bed is still there. You can see how it would be such a formidable defensive place or a place for an ambush. And Sherman knows this because he's been there. So he says, yeah, I'm not stupid. I'm not going down through there. I'm going to go around Johnston. So he will actually issue 20 days of rations to his troops. And they're going to march around and try to find the Confederate right flank. Well, what ends up happening is Johnston has fallen back. He realizes that Sherman's not going to fall into the trap, and the Union forces are going to start really pushing toward Dallas and Marietta, Georgia. And when they do that,
let me pause you. Where are those in relation to Atlanta?
They're above Atlanta.
Okay.
Kind of to the east, kind of to the southeast, or I guess northeast of Atlanta. They're little strategic areas. Mm-hmm. Johnston's going to put up a massive defensive line. About the time around by May 25th, he's going to have a really great line from New Hope Church all the way down to Pickett's Mill. And this is part of Pickett's Mill is one small battle mm-hmm. With a lot of how you say a lot of repercussions, mm-hmm. Consequences. A lot of consequences for such a small battle in a major campaign. There's like 56 days of fighting. That we talk about 7 days. They're fighting for 56 days Jeez. Along the line, retreating and extending the lines. Johnston, when he realizes that Sherman's not going to come through Allatoona Pass, he thinks about the next move. He's like, Sherman's going to go around. And he's going to try to get on my right flank and get to Atlanta. So Johnston extends his line. And he's going to take Patrick Clayburn, Irish-born general. He actually, the Irish, a lot of during the time he was born, are not. Most of them are pretty poor before they come over. His family actually was not. His family was very well to do. His dad was a doctor and was actually pretty much the main local doctor. Where he was. They didn't really have city life, even though his dad worked in the city. They chose to be outside the city in Ireland. Eventually, they will move, and he'll actually have a second. His mother dies when he's an infant, and so he never really knows his biological mother, but his dad remarries and has more kids. I think there's like 8 or 10 kids in the family, something like that. But anyway, Clayburn will actually come over here around 1849. So, he hasn't been here really, when you think about it, super, super long. Yeah. But his reputation, he had served in Ireland with the British Army for a little bit. So he's got some background. He's also going to be the general in the Confederate Army that is the first one to bring up enlisting slaves, giving them their freedom and enlisting them in the Confederate Army as soldiers. That is quickly going to be crushed when he mentions it, and it's well before this battle. And he's not really going to get reprimanded, but he's basically going to be told, don't ask that again.
Yeah.
But Claiborne was the first one that comes up with that. Of course, we know 1865, that starts happening. The Confederates start going, okay, hey, we'll give you your freedom if you fight for us, because they're low on men by that time.
Yeah.
So Claiborne had some forethought there, and his forethought is what really makes him stand out. He's actually one of my favorite generals in the Western theater for sure. They called him the Stonewall of the West. He's a hard fighter. You're not going to just run over him. Sherman even says after the war, they have a toast. Sherman's with one of the guys. He says, who'd you serve with? He said, well, I served in Claiborne's division. He makes a toast to Claiborne and said, I knew when we faced Claiborne, we were going to have a fight. And he's absolutely right. Claiborne will meet his untimely death at the Battle of Franklin when he's under John Bell Hood at that time, who commands the Army of Tennessee. Then after Johnson's relieved, and that seems to be a pride thing. Hood has at that time kind of chastised all the generals and said they didn't want to fight, and you've got one of the best fighters in the Confederacy, and he leads a charge and gets killed. And the record for these guys is amazing. They literally are the equivalent to the Stonewall Brigade in the West. After Pickett's Mill, they fight at Kennesaw Mountain, and they save the army there. They're holding the fort down there. Pickett's Mill, they're doing the same thing. So when Johnston figures out, hey, Sherman's coming, he's trying to get around my flank, he's going to detach Claiborne from Hardee's corps and send him down to his right near Pickett's Mill. Now, Claiborne is going to get there. He gets there about May 26th. There's been some cavalry fighting. And the Union think they may have found the Confederate right by that time. Again, Sherman had issued 20 days rations, so he thinks he knows all the terrain. He's now marching overland to try to get around Johnston, and he doesn't know the terrain as well as he thought. He knew Allatoona Pass and above, but to the I guess east, southeast, he doesn't really know what the terrain is. It's hilly, it's rocky, there's trees everywhere. It is a very thick forest through there, and the terrain breaks up those movements. It'll actually take him 22 days to get where he wants to go. But by the time he gets to the area of Pickett's Mill, they're going to attack at New Hope Church, which is to the west of Pickett's Mill, kind of the northwest, a little bit, not super far. But they're going to attack it at New Hope Church. There's going to be a bloody battle there with Hood and some of Sherman's troops. And the next day, as I said, on the 26th, there's a little cavalry skirmish that happens near Pickett's Mill. And that's where they think, okay, we found the Confederate right flank. So Sherman is going to send troops out to find that right flank and attack and get around Johnston. The problem is when he does that, they only have to march 2 miles. On May 27th, General Oliver O. Howard of Chancellorsville, Gettysburg fame, is now in command of the 4th Corps and Sherman's military division of the Mississippi. And he is going to march those 2 miles, but not thinking about how the terrain is. A 2 mile march, they're actually going to get, it's a mile and a half that they get to first, is going to be about 5 hours. Now, I'm a big dude, but I can march 2 miles in like 40 minutes. But you're thinking about 14,000 men marching over ground that they don't know anything about. It's pretty hectic, and it's like I said, it's really hilly. There's open fields, but then there's just randomly you just run into this belt of woods that just seems to go on forever. So at Pickett's Mill, Claiborne is now set up. That's where they have decided to put their defensive line. Claiborne has the forethought on the 26th to have a road cut out to his right. Now, he is the right flank at that point. He's got some cavalry out to the right. And we mentioned about the Alabamians. You're going to have some Alabamian and Mississippi. It's an Alabama-Mississippi brigade. It's mixed under Lowry. is going to be involved in this. You're going to have General Kelly, and I believe Kelly actually has some Alabamians with him as well. They are going to be on the extreme right. Claiborne actually has them a little bit in front because he wants to see what the Union's doing. Howard will finally get on location, and the forethought that Patrick Claiborne had to make that road is going to really come into play on the 27th. He cuts that road simply in case he has to move troops that way. They don't expect the Union to come out that far because of the terrain, but it's possible. So you never know. So he sends the cavalry farther out past Pickett's Mill to kind of observe what the Union troops are doing. When Howard arrives on location, he's going to do a reconnaissance. In front of him is an open field, and he decides, well, I'm not going to march down this open field right into the Confederates. That's just stupid. So he decides to go a little bit north and try to find the right flank. Well, as he does so, his troops are going to kind of get moved about. He's going to have Hazen's troops that start out, and as Hazen starts marching toward Claiborne, his troops, his divisions are going to kind of start to separate. Or brigades, they're going to separate because of the terrain. One's actually just going to wander off toward this cornfield that Claiborne has made a road to. And the Confederates, I should talk about their defensive position. They are set up from New Hope Church all the way down to Pickett's Mill. There's a ravine in front of them. They're going to have two 1841 howitzers at that ravine. So pretty antiquated artillery, but at close range, enfilade,
It'll get the job done.
It's going to get the job done. And the Yankees are going to find that out very quickly. The attacks will start, like I said, they actually started their march at like 10 a.m. The attack, they're not going to really start advancing till about 4:30, and the attack will begin at 5. So Claiborne, as these troops are starting to come down toward him, he sees that they've split. He's going to start kind of shuffling some units to his right down this road. And they're going to end up occupying that cornfield. You're going to have Granbury's Texans are going to be the first troops that actually the Union engages there. And the Texans, they're a very well-known unit in the West. Granbury is a hard fighter, one of Claiborne's best, and they absolutely devastate Hazen as he comes down. They just annihilate him, basically. There's supposed to be support from Nathaniel McLean. He is supposed to be giving support to Hazen and then Gibbon, and then I'm trying to remember his name, Neffler. I never say his name right. I'm sure I'm not saying it right. It might be Neffler. But McLean is supposed to be giving some support there. He doesn't. He basically stays inactive. What should have taken him a 5-minute move takes him 45 minutes to move. And then he just stops. So there's a backstory to that. O.O. Howard is the general in command of the right flank of the Union Army that is in the air at the Battle of Chancellorsville. Howard blames McLean and several other generals for the debacle that happens there when Stonewall Jackson's flank attack happens and pushes the 11th Corps out of its position and starts rolling up the Union line. Howard blames McLean among other people. Now, I've got a little soft spot for Nathaniel McLean because of the Battle of McDowell. He is there, fights against Stonewall Jackson, and as the Union does lose that battle, but as they march down, even out of ammunition, he will turn his brigade around and face the Confederates until all troops have come off. He started the battle, basically ended the battle.
Is he in regimental command? What
He is
in?
in. Are you talking like
At McDowell?
He's in a division command at this point.
At this point?
Or at McDowell, yeah, regimental. Sorry.
Okay.
I thought you meant. You meant Pickett's Mill. Yeah, at Pickett's Mill, he is under. He's under Howard, and he has command. I might be wrong on that. He might not be under Howard. No, I'm sorry. He's part of the 23rd Army Corps, 2nd Division.
Just attached.
He is now a brigadier general. He's attached to attached to Howard to assist in this attack. But he doesn't like Howard because Howard blamed him for Chancellorsville. So he says, basically, I'm not going to help the dude.
Yeah.
I don't care what happens. So McLean just sets. It's a heck of a thing to punish these other troops just because you don't like their commander. But that's exactly what he does.
Pettiness.
It's a little petty, yeah. So Granbury's Texans, when they face Hazen the first wave, they're, like I said, they're just gonna beat them back. I mean, there's no contest there really. The Union troops, as they come in, they're gonna get down in this ravine, and the Confederate troops are just gonna let loose on them. They've got logs piled up, they've got earthworks. It's a terrible attack. To try to come up at some points, I think some of the troops will actually get like right to the walls that they have, but they're shot down. There will be some later in the evening that'll be there, and they can hear the Confederates talking. They're that close. It's like right above them, and they're trying to sneak off in the dark to get back to Union lines. After Hazen goes down and fights, it's only about 50 minutes that he fights before he's really bloodied, and they start to fall back. At that moment, Howard is going to send in Colonel William Gibson's brigade, and this is going to be the second attack on Cleburne's troops. That's going to fail as well because there's no support. Gibson goes down. McLean, again, is supposed to be supporting. There's no support. So Gibson's men will fall back another, an hour later. So we're at 2 hours of battle, and the Confederates haven't really budged. They've even moved troops, farther down to kind of plug a hole that occurred that really wasn't there to begin with. So around 6, Sherman, his troops are going to receive orders to end this attack. Like, it's a debacle at this point. It's terrible. Nothing has went the Union's way. And unfortunately, before that order gets there, Howard is going to order Neffler and he's going to order him to the front to check the Confederates. Well, the fighting is going to continue there. They're going to fight back and forth. Meanwhile, the Union had continued to try to go to the right even farther. So while Granbury's Texans are fighting, there's a lot of pressure on General Kelly, who's the cavalry leader. There's a lot of pressure on him. And so when those Confederates come down the road toward the cornfield and get up against him, they're going to be able to stop the other little prong of this attack. It's kind of like a two-prong attack, not necessarily intended that way. But you're going to have Scribbler King and Carlin that are going to come down on the far right. And they'll be excited because they actually finally find the far right. And one of them will say, damn you, we've caught you without your logs. The problem is they don't get very far. Yeah. They come under intense fire from Lowry and Kelly. And actually Govan, who is in the line next to Granbury, will move out and move off to that farther right. And his troops will end up beating back the advance of Scribbler King and Carlin. And it's an absolute, a battle that should have never happened.
How many troops was McLean in command of at this point?
McLean he's in command of the 1st Brigade. So he's got about 1,500.
1,500? So if you're looking at, that's a considerable size, given that if you've got 14,000 Federals.
Yeah, you've already got 14,000 Federals.
And you're taking that 1,500 basically away because he's not doing anything.
He's not really doing anything. And you're facing Cleburne, who...
you need an advantage with anyhow.
Yeah, Cleburne's got about 5,000. So, yeah. You've got a major advantage there. And of note, he also has a guy, it's Brigadier General Polk, but not Leonidas Polk. It's Lucius Polk.
Any relation?
Confederate. Actually, yeah, it's his nephew. So Lucius will be in this battle as well. He's actually the left of Cleburne's line. And he's gonna have some fighting going on there as well, but he's kind of looking at McLean. He's participating against Gibson and Hazen and Neffler, but McLean, he sees McLean.
He's waiting for it, but it
Hanging
just
there.
never comes.
He's just there. Meanwhile, while this is going on, the Union are going to actually a major bombardment's happening up at New Hope Church. So that's supposed to be a diversionary attempt. Now, Sherman ordered this attack. He knew about it. He never says anything about it after the battle. It's not in his memoirs. He doesn't write a note about it. I don't even know if he talked to a friend about it. But there's no mention of it from William T. Sherman. It's as if it never happened. Now,
Do you think he was kicking himself for not having those troops present
I
down
think-
here at Pickett's Mill instead of up there?
I
for a
think a little
diversion?
bit of that, and also betting on that he knew the terrain that he didn't know. It should have never taken those guys 5 hours. But if you don't know where you're going, Howard at one point will send a message back and says, I think I found the Confederate right flank. I think. He's never sure. And then when he actually does find it, it's too late because now there's reinforcements there and the Confederate right flank has extended. So he's never sure of what exactly goes on. And then to even add to that, during the battle, there's going to be a shell that hits near Howard, and a piece of it's going to come up into his foot. Now, he's actually just going to get a really bad bruise on his foot because the thickness of his sole of his shoe was very thick, and so he gets a bad bruise. But in his mind, now this man's already lost an arm. His first thought is, I just lost my leg, and I'm going to bleed out. I'm going to die.
Yep.
And they set him down, and he realizes, oh, this is painful. I can't really walk, but I can still direct stuff. So now Howard at one point is actually sitting on the ground directing units where he needs them to go. By the time this battle's over, it's really only about a 2-hour battle. Darkness has started to set in. Neffler is there to just hold the Confederates back. That's all they want to do, is hold them back so that the Union can make a defensive line now above Pickett's Mill, facing these entrenched Confederates. And they're going to start doing that. They're going to start digging in. The Confederates, however, are not going to sit idle. Granbury's going to go to Cleburne and say, hey, my guys did some really good work today. And mind you, they only have like 300 casualties during this battle. It's not, they don't have near the amount that the Union will have. But Granbury's going to say, hey, we did really good work. The Yankees are there. We don't want them to come up the ravine in the middle of the night. We should attack them. And Cleburne's basically like, well, what are you proposing? And Granbury says, I want to take everybody. Let's go. and Cleburne says, okay.
About it.
He's like, okay. So these guys come over their earthworks and dive down into this ravine that they've been fighting the Yankees at. One guy even says, like, you couldn't see anything. They just, if they saw a muzzle flash, they fired at it, but they're charging fixed bayonets, coming down with some hand-to-hand combat. But he says one of his compadres, like, just runs off a rock ledge and dies. Like, he's not shot, nothing. He just off the rock because he couldn't see it.
Wow.
He was charging, and he's killed in the charge, but not by the Union troops. Wow. He's killed by the fall. And it's just a massive attack, and it pushes the Union even farther back. By 10 p.m., Neffler is told to completely withdraw. His brigade is trying to withdraw at the same time this charge happens. So I think part of it is Granbury probably heard the movement and the whispering and all of that, and he's probably thinking an attack. It's actually going to be a retreat. So they're going to fire kind of a volley at these Texans guys, but the Texans are just they're coming and they're taking a bunch of them prisoner. Throughout the night, these guys are going to be very close, and the no man's land where this ravine and stuff is, they're going to hear all the wounded and dying there. Howard actually writes a little piece about what he witnessed there at Pickett's Mill, and it's kind of interesting. I was going to read what he said. He said, this is what he says about Pickett's Mill. During the war, a few sad scenes impressed me more than any others. One was the field after the Battle of Gettysburg. A second scene was the Battle of Antietam. But these things, not happy to relate, were matched at Pickett's Mill. Now, Gettysburg's 3 days. Antietam's bloodiest day in American history. Pickett's Mill's like 2 hours. Let that sink in.
Wow.
Oliver Howard, who's been at both of these, he doesn't even mention Chancellorsville. He's been at both of these major, huge battles in the East, and he is saying Pickett's Mill is equivalent. That's pretty powerful to me. He says that opening in the forest, faint fires here and there, revealing men wounded, armless, legless, or eyeless, some with heads bound up with cotton strips, some standing and walking nervously around, and some sitting with bended forms, and some prone upon the earth. Who can picture it? A few men in despair have resorted to drink for relief. So the sad sounds from those in pain were mingled with the oaths of the drunken and the more heartless. And that's coming from the guy that is leading this attack. And again, he's wounded, not a serious wound for him, but his men, we often hear about battles where they say, I could have walked a mile across. At Pickett's Mill, literally the Confederates, the hillside is just dark blue. The ravine is filled. There's hardly any Confederate dead there. It's all Union troops, which is crazy. It's an absolute blunder. As a matter of fact, a guy that is part of this battle and writes books afterwards, Ambrose Bierce, he will actually write a book about Pickett's Mill called The Criminal Blunder. He calls it a criminal blunder. He's just stupid. It should have never happened. Now, he says that Howard only committed one sentence to it. He summed it up in one sentence. Obviously, Howard had a couple more sentences to that. But he's angry. He witnessed this, and the troops never moved. But here's what Bierce says about it. It is ignored by General Sherman in his memoirs, yet Sherman ordered it. General Howard wrote an account of the campaign of which it was an incident and dismissed it in a single sentence, yet General Howard planned it. And it was fought as an isolated and independent action under his eye. Whether it was so trifling an affair as to justify this inattention, let the reader judge.
So top brass is kind of writing
Top brass is writing this off.
Just a minor skirmish.
Yeah,
when in fact
it's a bad look is what it becomes. You've got all these troops, and they should have overwhelmed the Confederates. Now I mentioned those howitzers. Those howitzers are firing down into that ravine when the Yankees come, when these charges happen. They're enfilade. They're firing down the line. And it is absolutely decimating these guys. You've got the musket fire here, you got the cavalry and rifle fire, and then you've got two old cannons, but they're shooting canister straight down the ravine. What are you going to do? It's hell. The victory that the Confederates will have will embolden them to attack the next day, and they're going to attack not far from Pickett's Mill near Dallas, Georgia, not Dallas, Texas. Dallas, Georgia, that'll be a Confederate defeat. But
how many days after Pickett's Mill?
The very next day.
So these same Confederates will shift.
They'll shift a little bit farther to the right.
And Dallas is more of a well-known battle. It's my understanding, correct? Dallas.
Yeah, it's a bigger battle. You have Dallas and Marietta.
Yeah. It's
a bigger battle, lasts a lot longer, but in the end becomes a Confederate defeat and ends up causing Johnston to retreat more. But Sherman will stay on this line. This New Hope Church line is what they call it. He'll stay on that line till sometime in June before he makes another move. Once he does that, that's when Johnston will pull back.
So how are we looking in terms of total Union casualties for this?
What's the casualties here?
Let's see.
Because for them to write it off as a minor skirmish or just a little action
incident,
I think the casualties will
so
contradict that.
If we look at the Army of the Cumberland, which is mainly who who we have here.
Army of the Cumberland.
Army of the Cumberland. Now, you got to remember in
Cumberland, like we're talking Tennessee?
Yeah, Cumberland,
Okay.
Cumberland Gap.
Okay.
So you have the military division of the Mississippi has the Army of the Cumberland, the Army of the Tennessee, and I believe what's the other army there, Jack? That's within the Union Army. It was 3 armies. That kind of got consolidated in the Western Theater. I can't remember what the third one is, but Sherman ends up commanding all 3 of these armies, and they're all part of his district. I want to say it's like 1,500 casualties or almost 2,000 casualties.
Army of the Cumberland, Army of the Ohio, and Army of the Tennessee.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
it. Army of the Ohio.
Sounds about right.
I want to say it's
Yeah, I just knew that.
yeah.
Shout out Google.
Good job, Google.
1,500 compared to what are we thinking in terms of
About
Confederate?
300.
300.
Yeah.
Casualties
it's-
for Confederates.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
casualties
right
are
around
only
that.
about 300. Union, I think it's like 15 to 2,000, 1,500 to 2,000 total with wounded. And now they may be
Confederates are outnumbered here, obviously.
big time.
But
When are they not?
but
You know.
having that's what I was again saying.
Actually, one of the other battles we may talk about in the future, they will not be.
Oh,
Spoiler alert.
no, we didn't spoil anything. No spoiler alert.
It's a spoiler alert for
Aaron.
For me. Yeah, it's just here's one of the sorry.
No. I was
ahead.
just I was just gonna say. Yeah, I mean they were dug in. It's like it doesn't matter what your
almost-
size is, as long as you can fill the line.
Almost reminiscent of like a Fredericksburg style of fighting, although you're in the mountains rather than along a river or something like that. But just the way that it plays out is almost like a Western theater Fredericksburg.
Yeah, and Claiborne, I talked about his forethought for cutting a road. He also has the forethought of I'm not going to cut. Normally, you would cut fields of fire. He didn't. He left the underbrush. He left the trees. He did that on purpose because he
cover.
knew it's cover. They have to come through at me. They have to go through that to get to me. And I've got a ravine in front of me, and I've got breastworks.
And they won't do it. They probably wouldn't risk going through that, not knowing what they're going to get into on the other side of that.
Yep.
So you may as well keep extending the line until you can get to a point where you can see it.
Yeah, and when the Union troops come down through there, they come right at them. And these you've got guys from Alabama, Georgia, Arkansas, Mississippi. These guys are, they're hardened troops. Texas,
Yeah.
got some Texans out there. They're hardened troops, and they are. If I remember correctly, I think the Texans either didn't trust the people from Arkansas or Georgians. One of those two. The Texans weren't. There was one group that they weren't very. They said, "Hey, don't you guys run, or we'll shoot you in the back." During this battle, and they don't run. They actually perform very well. But like I was saying, when the next morning, the chapter in the book recommendation I'll give, chapter 16 is actually called "The Great Blue Carpet."
Yeah, just because of the
mass amount of casualties.
It's amazing that they would try to write that incident off for as many casualties. I mean, 1,500 beats. It beats some more notable battles.
in a couple hours battle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in just a few hours. And I mean, it does go into nightfall, but the main fighting is really just those few hours.
And the amount of time itself, I think, just kind of that much bloodshed in that short of a period of time. I mean, you don't see that very often.
I'm sorry, I had the Confederates 500. Union losses are 1,600.
Wow.
So 1,600, and this is a major Confederate victory in the Western Theater, and it doesn't get talked about, obviously by the Union because it's an embarrassment.
Well, even still today, I don't think it gets talked about as much as it should, because when you look it up in terms of like trying to find a battle map for it or heavy documentation of like the movements and all that stuff, there are other smaller battles that are more well mapped out and documented than this
absolutely.
one. And this one, I mean, just by what we've talked about, should have, you would think a cartographer would, or a historian would, map out that battle to a T just because of how much is going on here.
Yeah, and the great thing, shout out to the Pickett's Mill Battlefield Foundation, they have saved pretty much the entire battlefield at Pickett's Mill.
That's awesome.
It's state run. It was established, I believe, 1991. So it's not really that old of a park. I've been there, and it is amazing to be there. The terrain is pristine, and you can really see why it is what it is.
Yeah.
You can see the ravine. And of course, there's an Aaron Civil War Travels video on it, but you see the ravine, and in the video, I'm standing there, and you can look behind me and just tell
It drops.
it's a hell of a drop.
Yeah.
And those guys were charging down it and then trying to charge up the other side. Of note, one of the howitzers was found in the bottom of the Atlanta Museum. And they traced it back and found out it was at that battle. It was one of Claiborne's howitzers.
Wow.
And it is now in the Pickett's Mill Visitor Center.
Wow.
So it's
That's
literally yards from where it was setting.
That's
Wow.
awesome.
So, yeah, very cool. It's not on the same carriage.
Yeah.
Go figure. Yeah.
Yeah, the carriage they stuck it on, which even the historian there was like, I don't know why they did this. It's not a cannon carriage. It's more like just a regular wagon carriage. That it's or the wheels, and so it makes you wonder what
How many casualties that cannon alone was responsible for in
Inflicted,
those
yeah.
1600s?
just shooting those things down the ravine.
Now, how far is that ravine from the Confederate?
It's
defense.
directly in front of them.
Like how many yards would you say roughly if you were to guess?
10.
That close?
10
It drops?
10 to 15.
And-
it just starts sloping down.
Oh
Are
my
the remnants of
God.
the earthworks still there? Or?
Yes, there's still remnants of the earthworks. You can walk all the way down to the cornfield. You can walk the Union lines. And really, at one point, there's one of the signs there, and I turned around and looked, and it is so thick. We think about the wilderness and how thick that was during a battle.
Mm-hmm.
This is, it's equivalent in a lot of ways. And then when it opens, you go into a ravine. So really, you don't have any respite from being along the deadline there, which is actually what this line will be called from New Hope Church all the way down. It'll be called the Deadline.
Wow. What a crazy,
yeah.
crazy story.
It's absolute, definitely a debacle. And I like, you have the part with McLean and Howard too.
Yeah.
An Eastern Theater issue happened, and now we're in the Western Theater, and it's affecting these guys.
Still can't figure it
And
out.
they can't get over it.
Has this ever been depicted in film?
That I don't know.
Make a
It may
good
have
movie.
been.
It would
Make
make a
good movie.
great story.
It really would. Yeah, it'd be a really
Yeah.
cool movie. Ron Maxwell, if you're listening.
Yeah. Or Will Eichler.
Or Will
who's-
Eichler. We've got an
Yeah.
idea for a Civil War movie now.
Whose birthday it is when this episode drops. So
Oh, nice.
I mean, what is it, November 15th?
We're in November, yeah.
Yeah, November 15th. Happy birthday, Will. Will's a good friend of the podcast, and he brings great historical events to life. But if you want to watch some of the things Will does, and like a segment that the Battlefields Foundation has partnered with Civil War Digital Digest, which Will is the face of, the Fridays at the Front series, it can all be found, and many other great historical shows can be found on History Fix. You can join on there for movies, documentaries, short films, and how-to videos. Historic eras currently range from the 1st to 21st centuries. The team of curators over at History Fix bring you the most comprehensive and authentic historical content available. Battlefields and Bourbon podcast listeners and fans, if you're listening right now, you can receive an extra 20% off your first year's annual subscription to History Fix with code BATTLEFIELD. So if you sign up at www.historyfix.com and use promo code BATTLEFIELD, that's BATTLEFIELD, all one word. Every subscription includes a 7-day risk-free trial. After signing up, you can download the History Fix apps, most places you stream your shows from. Escape into history with History Fix. Myself, I am a History Fix subscriber. Not free, paid for that before this, and I will continue to subscribe every year because of the content that's on there. Aaron, are you a
Worthy
subscriber?
investment.
Yes, I am.
Yes, so quality stuff coming from History Fix. Like I said, you can watch that Fridays at the Front series that tells you what's happening with some of the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields work. with some of the preservation efforts there, things like that, but also just a wide variety of great history films, shows, short clips, things like that. So use Coast Battlefields if you're listening to get History Fix today, 20% off. Elijah, I don't know what you're waiting for. Get on the train.
One day.
Yeah, but a great story would be something that a History Fix should have depicted, I think, one day. Pickett's Mill.
I mean, this battle, it's a couple hours. We've got a lot of cool things in. We've got, the thing with Chancellorsville.
Yeah, got those connections.
We've got a night attack. That doesn't happen very often. In which the Confederates are like, yeah, let's do it. Just a ton of
Action-packed.
action in a couple hours.
The Atlanta campaign in general, as a split up as like a gods and generals style of cutting to this battle to this battle to this battle. I think if you did the Atlanta campaign in that fashion, that would be
doesn't get enough credit. So
it doesn't.
It definitely needs a light shined on it.
If you get a chance, so Jack, you know this. When Aaron Civil War Travels decides to go traveling, sometimes it's just at the last minute and might end up in Vicksburg or Atlanta. So a couple years ago, that's what I did. I decided to go to Atlanta. I left at like 2 a.m. and drove straight through. I got to Ringgold Gap just as it was getting light and ended up at Tunnel Hill and Rocky Face Ridge, just a ton of battlefields, Duck Gap. It was an amazing little trip. And one of the battles that was on my mind was Pickett's Mill. Mm-hmm. I didn't know anything about it at the time, but it just stuck out to me. I got to New Hope Church and everything, and there's still some earthworks there to see. Actually, one of my YouTube followers and Facebook followers actually lives right next to him. I didn't know that at the time. He didn't tell me till after I was there. But I could have had a free supper, I guess. But anyway, being able to go through that and go through Atlanta and Ezra Church and things like that, and then you get to this pristine battlefield because Atlanta's
developed.
It's developed. Yeah. I mean, Ezra Church, there's a park there right now, and that's a big battle. Yeah. That's a big bloody battle, and
so it's a pretty pristine landscape. Yeah. So folks can go down and visit that state park. Because you said there's a visitor center.
Yeah, there's a visitor center there. I was showing Elijah here that the 1st and 41st Ohio, Jack, I'll show you the picture here. That's the ravine they're going down, that slope right there. So the trail is right there, and the Confederates are just up on this ridge.
Any monuments out there? Like, was there any post-war?
Just signs. Yeah, just signs.
Well, I meant, like, was there any, the veterans, did they put anything up to mark there?
I didn't see anything or hear anything that they had put up.
Okay.
I think just because of the terrain, it hasn't really.
It almost got kind of written off too.
Well, it was written off, and you think about too, 1991 is when this thing gets saved, really.
Yeah.
And shout out to the farmers and everybody for not
destroying it, developing
it to whatever. Yeah. We've unfortunately lost a lot of battlefields that way.
That's, I think, one of those battles that, obviously, for the fact that it's been written off by the higher ups, one of those ones that I think the enlisted men would probably want to forget as well. Not one that you would want to put a monument to, because at least as far as we've talked about, there's no, outstanding merits of valor or bravery by the Federals. They've just kind of gotten it handed to them. They got it handed to them.
I would say, I play devil's advocate here. Those guys, I'm sure, would love to do it, but the fact that, in the post-war era, and when you go to reunions and you go to things, and some of these people that survived the war and write their memoirs,
you want to celebrate your greatest victories, not your lowest.
Those
defeats.
Things too, and if your officers and people that were leading you during the war survived the war and write things and are in the public eye, if they're not giving it credit, you're not going to want to claim that too.
Focus on the big victories and the good memories,
And there's also the other point of looking at the amount of casualties. A lot of times, historians, people will look and go, "Oh, it's 2,100 casualties.
Nothing.
That's nothing."
Yeah.
They don't look at how it was just in a couple hours.
This was and we can say this with every single battle, but from the perspective of these men, I'm sure. especially the Federals. This was their Gettysburg. This was their, this was their biggest battle, especially for the families of the men that never made it up the hill in the ravine or never made it back out. This is their biggest battle, especially, for, like I said, those families.
Definitely.
When you call those, go ahead.
Go ahead. No,
so you call those numbers, I mean, it's just numbers on paper for us modern historians where we interpret, just 2,100. But to those men that were there in that ravine, fearing for their lives, every single person falling next to them, they're thinking, am I going to be next?
Oh, yeah.
Am I the next
we
one
can't
that's
even fathom it,
Yeah, it's hard to relate to that. And I think that's probably another big reason why that's not something that those soldiers would want to recall or memorialize or something, is because that probably brings back some pretty traumatic, memories and stuff, because I can't imagine that that's something that you want to go and tell your friends about. We were here, we did that. That's not something you want to recall. You want to recall your glory days, and that's not one of them.
And for these Union troops at the end of this battle, all they're thinking about is getting out of there safe.
Right.
If they pop up, they're shot. Like the Confederates were shooting at sound at some points.
Well, and it gets overlooked by Dallas the next day.
Yeah, Dallas the next day.
And what's the condition of that battlefield?
Not a lot there.
Yeah.
There is. So behind the bank, there's a large field where a charge happened. There's a bridge that takes you on out through the woods, but it's really not.
Pickett's Mill is probably the most pristine of this stint of battles, correct?
Of this line, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Now, if you go a little farther, Resaca, very well preserved. There's still obviously a lot there. It's a little creepy, and I was an officer for a long time. But you pull into a sheriff's office to read one of the signs with cannons there, and all the deputies are kind of looking at you as they're pulling out of the jail. So, like, they got to be on high alert. So.
And what's your book recommendation?
So there's actually two, and I would love to find Ambrose Bierce, The Criminal Blunder book.
Yeah.
But this one is by Brad Bukovich.
Let me see.
What's that? Butkovich. It's part of the Civil War sesquicentennial series
By History Press or Arcadia Press.
Yeah. And yes, History Press, and it's called The Battle of Pickett's Mill Along the Dead Line, which is also another thing that Ambrose Bierce called this battle. It's pretty detailed.
So it's got its own book, which is pretty.
Yeah, it's very detailed. He's got.
For a 2-hour battle, that's a decently thick book.
A battle I've never heard of, and I don't know everything, but I know some stuff, and I didn't know about it until Aaron mentioned it to me. He's like, "This is my favorite battle right now. I love this battle." I was like, "Okay."
It's definitely my favorite Western theater battle.
Oh, for sure. I see why.
And I apologize. The park opened in 1992. He's even got the history of how the park came to be in here, and it's just it's a really. I encourage you to definitely go there. One of the coolest battlefields I've ever been to. And the amount of attacks. There's six Union, 6 attacking Federal brigades, and they can't crack the line.
Yeah.
So definitely a cool place to go. And I'm going to give a shout out here.
Yeah.
We're talking about birthdays. So as we are doing, when this episode drops, Will Eichler, you said his birthday. So the week before Mr. Will's birthday, so it would have been Tuesday with the 7th, I think. That is Oliver O. Howard's birthday. I'm sorry, the 8th, Wednesday the 8th, is Oliver O. Howard's birthday. So
happy belated birthday to O.O. Howard.
Yeah, O.O. Howard. I mean, hopefully he gets my card that I sent him. And I'm not one of these historians that goes and poo-poos on Howard all the time. Yes, he screwed up at Chancellorsville. But you look at him at Gettysburg, he doesn't get the credit he really deserves at Gettysburg. He could have simply continued retreating. Yeah. Instead, he sits up on the hill that he and Reynolds had probably talked about. And so, yes, got to give Hancock his laurels for the Battle of Gettysburg, but Howard doesn't do too bad there. Pickett's Mill, actually, I think even with the debacle at Chancellorsville, is his worst battle. It's
there's just nothing you could do.
There's no good that comes out of it for the Union. So,
well, awesome. Well, thank you so much, folks, for listening. Thanks to Aaron for coming on
guys.
and doing our first Western theater battle. This will not be our last. We've got Aaron locked in maybe for another Western theater.
Our Western folks are probably happy to get some love out there, because I know we've been just kind of focusing heavy on the
Eastern
Virginia
theater things. So
yeah, the next Western battle that we talk about is like my second favorite.
So. Yeah, so we'll just go into that. But thanks you so much. Don't forget to reach out to our contacts either in our DMs or private messages or our emails that are posted with recommendations for topics you'd like to hear, people you'd like to hear on. Maybe we can't fly them out here, but we can sure as heck get them on a FaceTime or a Zoom call, and love to chat with them and sit and sip and talk some things. So we appreciate you folks for listening. This was the Battle of Pickett's Mill, and this was Clyde Mays. I think I had my second glass. Aaron, you didn't have time to even think while talking.
It back.
And Elijah, you had a couple final thoughts on the Clyde Mays.
Clyde Mays, definitely one to go check out. Something you'll find on the shelf, and it's very, very tasty, very affordable. Definitely one that I'll keep on my shelf for sure. That's some awesome stuff, and hopefully they hear this and they keep up the great work, because that's some good stuff.
Yeah, definitely surprised me I don't know. The bottle impressed me, but you never know sometimes, and you can't assume all bourbons are good, but this was really good and light and almost refreshing in some aspects. So.
I'm planning on stealing the bottle when you guys aren't looking.
Yeah, that's our parting gift. But well, thank you all for listening, and tune in for the next one.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.